Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Oakdale Planning Commission. Call to order. Roll call.
Pearson.
Here.
Willenbring.
Here.
Campbell.
Present.
Macaulay.
Here.
Diata informed me that he will not be able to make it. Hagan.
Here.
And Wilson also informed me that he is unable to make it tonight.
Thank you. Pledge of allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the agenda. Anyone have any changes that they feel need to be made, or shall we accept it as presented?
Move to accept it presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any changes or corrections to make to the minutes from May 1st, 2025? I look for a motion to approve as presented.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion, minutes are accepted. Open forum. This is a time for anyone in the audience to come forward if they wish to make comment on something that's not on the agenda. Again, that's not on the agenda. If anyone has anything to make comment to. Seeing that there is no one in the audience for that, open the forum and close the forum. Old business, none. New business, a public hearing on comprehensive plan amendment, 5115, 5127 Geneva Avenue, and 6048, 6149, and 6211 Upper 51st Street North, and 6138 Highway 36 North. Luke?
Thank you, Chair. So the location of this request, it's in the area that's located northeast of the intersections of highways, state highways 120 and 36. So the area is shown on the screen in the turquoise outline. So specifically, this area consists of approximately 8.5 acres at the following addresses that the chair just mentioned, 5115 and 5127 Geneva Avenue, 6048, 6149, and 6211 Upper 51st Street, and 6138 Highway 36 Boulevard North. So the purpose of this request is to re-guide the area in question from commercial to mixed use as a means to align the city's comprehensive plan guidance with local planning efforts and to expand future development opportunities for this area. So folks from the public, they might be wondering, what is a comprehensive plan? So state law says that a comp plan, it's a document that consists of goals, policies, standards, and maps to guide development within the community. So in other words, it serves as the foundation for land use decisions, including rezonings. The comp plan guidance specifies what types of land uses are allowed, such as residential, commercial, industrial, and so on. So it's a bit confusing, but to be clear, the comp plan guidance is separate and distinct from the zoning districts that the city has, but the comp plan guidance should align with the city's adopted zoning districts. So this image shows the comp plan guidance for the area, which is commercial. So the area in question, the addresses that I just rattled off, it's the, again, the turquoise outline there on the screen. Historically, this neighborhood has consisted of a mixture of uses. So you may recall that there was a year-long process in which the city, and we had a consultant at the time, we studied the area, and the city ultimately adopted the Glenbrook Small Area Plan. So that was back in September of 2023. And the intention of that plan was to develop a framework for future development, redevelopment efforts for this neighborhood. Just give it some direction going forward. So a key recommendation of the Glenbrook plan is to re-guide the area. Again, that's specifically, it's the area within the outline, the turquoise outline. Re-guide it from commercial to mixed use. So although it is not included in the Glenbrook plan's recommendation, staff is suggesting, the city staff is suggesting that we re-guide 6211 Upper 51st Street. So that is JG House Construction, if you're familiar with that property. We feel that it's also important to re-guide that from commercial to mixed use, just to enable or to help ensure that the area is a cohesive area and also to enable more flexibility for future development. So on this map, we are looking at the current zoning of the area. So if you recall from the previous slide, the area is guided for commercial, whereas the yellow shaded properties, there's 2 single families on the west side that front Highway 120, and then there's Eastgate Apartment there shaded in orange. So those are residentially zoned properties. Obviously those are not commercial. So the re-guidance from commercial to mixed use in this area would help correct that. The comp plan would also open up new development opportunities for vacant property, and specifically what we're talking about is 6138 Highway 36 Boulevard North, where my cursor is. There's about 2.5 acres or so. It's been vacant for about 20 years now. Currently, there is no active applications for this site, but there is strong interest from a developer to possibly construct 12 live-work condo units on that property. So going back just to the aerial, I do want to address some common questions related to comp plans. So I want to note that approval of a comp plan amendment does not rezone any property. A property owner would have to initiate that process. The amendment does not change the tax classification of properties. The tax classification, that's a fully separate designation that is determined by Washington County. Also, the amendment would not impose any special restrictions on the property. It doesn't include any new standards that you wouldn't see anywhere else. So the remaining steps of this process, I'll just go over those really quick. So after the public hearing is held and a recommendation is provided by the Planning Commission, the City Council will consider the amendment at their meeting on July 8th. If the City Council approves the request, the request would formally be submitted to the Metropolitan Council. That's the regional government agency that formally approves amendments to the comp plan. And just a final note, as required by state law and the Metropolitan Council, there is an affected jurisdictions review, and that has actually been completed already. So city staff proactively contacted the following government agencies for review and comment on the comprehensive plan. And they include the City of North St. Paul, Washington County, Ramsey County, the Minnesota DOT, and the Valley Branch Watershed District. So all of those jurisdictions have responded. We received the last response just yesterday, and there was no opposition from any of those jurisdictions. I just want to remind the commission that this is a public hearing item, and staff would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any comments before I open the public forum? Okay. This is comments on this item of business, the comprehensive plan amendment. So if anyone has comments, please come forward. I open the forum now. Does anyone wish to come forward to make comments to this comprehensive plan amendment? Seeing none, I close the open forum. Bring it back. Anyone have any further comments about this issue? Then I look for a motion to recommend approval of the comprehensive plan amendment to re-guide the properties addressed 5115, 5127 Geneva Avenue North, 6048, 6149, and 6211 Upper 51st Street North, and 6138 Highway 36 Boulevard North from commercial to mixed use.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item of business is a public hearing on zoning and subdivision code update and zoning map amendment. Is this Max, I take it?
I'll start it off, Chair. So thank you, Planning Commission, and good evening. As you may recall, tonight we're looking at the zoning and subdivision code update project. We now have a full, complete draft that we're presenting to you for recommendation of approval by the City Council. This has been an extensive, pretty long process for over 15 months. Staff and our partnership with HKGI, a consulting firm for planning. We've been working on this quite a bit and have really restructured the code, made improvements, public input efforts to make sure that we're making this align with what the public wants to see in the code. And yeah, we're very excited for this. So I'm going to let Luke say a few things, and then we can turn it over to HKGI to give a presentation that goes over the larger components of the proposed code update.
Max?
So really just want to say thank you to HKGI, our consulting partner on this project. This is a massive endeavor. It's been a long time coming for updating this code. And so yes, they've been outstanding to work with. And we also want to recognize the contributions, the discussions, the input that we received from the Planning Commission, the other advisory bodies, and of course the City Council. We've had many workshops. I can't remember how many workshops, but it's been quite a few. So we just want to recognize all those folks, and as well as the public. We had some really good public engagement, as Max was saying, some good feedback through our surveys and some through our stakeholder interviews that we had as well. But yeah, with that, I'll let Jeff and Beth take it over from there. So.
Great. Thanks, Luke and Max. Jeff Miller with HKGI, and I'm going to give just an overview of the changes that are being proposed with the amended zoning ordinance. And as you had in your packet, you had a chance to see a 2 or 3 page overview and then a more detailed summary of all the changes that are in the code, which, as you know, is a thicker thing to get through. So hopefully those summaries were helpful for you for tonight. So we're going to do the overview, and then we'll just very briefly verbalize the major changes to the code and then talk about the next steps. So the objectives of the code update, some of this won't be new to you because we're in front of you previously, but the objectives, just as a reminder, were to update and modernize the code, improve its user friendliness, aligned with the 2040 comp plan, as well as other plans, including the Glenbrook plan and then the Ped Bike plan. Ensure consistency with Minnesota state statutes, federal laws, and judicial rulings that have occurred since the last time it was updated. And then to facilitate achievement of the city's development and redevelopment goals, which are in the comp plan. If you look in there, it states explicitly to update the code to facilitate development and redevelopment, and there's numerous redevelopment parcels identified, and then development areas, including the station areas that are recently come online. So the process was to look at 4 chapters, mostly zoning, but also subdivisions, and then the smaller ones of Chapter 16, Planning and Development, and then the Trees chapter. The project had 4 phases, as you can see there. As Luke or Max said, about 15-month process. And the intent is to have this adopted in July by the City Council. The need and scope for the update, again, as a reminder, is that the staff deemed that it was an outdated at this point. The last full code update was in 2008. It wasn't we didn't touch everything substantially. So it was specific chapters and articles that were targeted, and it was a lot of them, but not every single one. And then, as you know, we partnered with staff to do these updates, so we led on a lot of them, but staff led on some of the chapters as well. And then the entire city code, not just zoning and subdivision, has gone to the Muni Code digital format as well, so it should be easier for everybody to use the code going forward. So, summary of major changes. A lot of this was to make the requirements easier to find. So that includes streamlining and reorganizing from 26 articles down to 11. So you can see the structure of the new code, and you'll see there's kind of intro, general stuff like definitions and administrative stuff. And then the zoning districts, which is 2504 through 2508 on the screen, the various types of districts that are in the zoning code. And then standards that are specific to uses is near the end of the zoning code. Development standards is its own thing, which is parking, landscaping, fences, that sort of thing. And then signage. On the theme of streamlining, the districts have been consolidated from 14 to 10. So you can see in that table that R2 and R3 have been consolidated into one district for residential. So there's 5 instead of 6. There's a new district, mixed use, which would line up probably with the comp plan amendment that's just going through at some point, if that gets rezoned. And then you can see the commercial, industrial, gateway business, all those were consolidated from 6 to 4 districts in the new code. And then tower and wetland, those districts they don't really need to be districts. They can be handled differently in the code, so they've gone away. We updated all the district purpose statements so it's clear what each district is meant to do and where it should be applied. We updated all the allowed uses and the dimensional standards. Those are all in tables in the code. If you looked at the proposed code in detail, you'll see those tables, which is a really good format to streamline the whole code so that it's easier to find things and not have everything listed in every single district. So some of the key things with the districts is the range of housing types allowed was expanded in R2, R3, and R4. So not R1, no change there, but R2, 3, and 4. Minimum lot sizes were reduced in R3 and R4, so that's medium density and high density residential. Maximum building height can go up to 60 feet in the high density district or R4 through a CUP process. And then a maximum impervious surface coverage standard has been added to the code. That is not in today's code. We updated definitions. A key thing there was in the residential districts, housing types are identified more clearly now, and so we needed to add definitions of each of those to that section of the code. As I mentioned, the tables, principal uses is a separate table from accessory uses, and then existing standards and districts were all consolidated into one article. So today, each district is its own thing in the code. So whatever that is, 14 articles for the districts, whereas now they're all in one article. So a big streamlining effort. And you can see in the table, which, just as an example, which residential uses are allowed in each district. As far as changes to the residential districts, which is what a lot of people are most concerned about, you can see in R1, there's no change. It only allows one-unit dwellings. R2 and 3 have been consolidated. So any property zoned R2 today, the change is that 2-unit dwellings, townhouses, and courtyard cottages will be allowed going forward. Properties that are zoned R3, the change is townhouses and courtyard cottages are allowed in that district going forward. If the property zone R4 today, courtyard cottages is the only thing that's being added, and then R5 is the high-density residential district, and the change there is to remove 1- and 2-unit dwellings.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Could you just define, what is the courtyard cottages? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so courtyard cottages are smaller detached homes, and they're clustered together on, they could be one lot or they could be separate lots, kind of like townhomes.
Are they like for seniors usually?
They are, yeah, seniors is a common market for that, but it can be for any age group. They are an option for getting higher density, low maintenance options for housing, like townhomes, except they're detached. Let's see. As far as the dimensional standards tables, so those for all the districts, all the standards are on 1 or 2 tables, and that's for lot size, site standards like setbacks, and then building heights and building width for some of the residential districts, distance between buildings. As an example, the courtyard cottages, there's a minimum distance that has to be between those those detached units, and then impervious surface coverage. So that information's all in these tables, and it's really easy to find it for any district.
So I've got one question for you. In the entire tome, is there a definition of impervious surfaces?
That's a good question. Yeah, Beth can look that up.
The reason I ask is because something you just said triggered it. I have seen people's homes where they didn't want to mow, so they've got everything covered in gravel. And I was talking with Luke earlier, and that's considered an impermeable surface by Oakdale, which means that'd be out of compliance, or that kind of use would be out of compliance.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a definition in there. Let's see, constructed hard surface or natural surface that prevents or retards the entry of water into the soil and causes water to run off the surface in greater. Examples include, but are not limited to, rooftops, sidewalks, patios, driveways, parking lots, storage areas, concrete, asphalt, or gravel. So,
Yeah, the gravel's there. I didn't say that when I read it, so okay.
yeah, yep. So that is in the code.
As you can see, I'm kind of saying that I think that may be a little too restrictive. But
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Yeah. So, yeah, were you talking about residential properties
Yes.
specifically? So just as an example, the R1 property is 24% is the maximum. R2 is 45, and I actually can't see the rest of that table on this screen, but the numbers are for residential, they're not super high. So,
And as I said, I know of an existing home, but I think it was in Cottage Grove that it was a friend of mine that had it as, it was all gravel.
yeah.
One more question, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you have page numbers where we can see this as, at the same time? Because it's kind of hard to read.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you wanna s-
Oops, sorry. Yes, so in the draft code, page 55 is where the impervious surface coverage numbers are for the residential districts.
Commissioners, one point of clarification with the gravel surfaces is under the current code, we do consider gravel to be impervious as well.
Okay.
As far as the development standards, I'll cover this first one, and then Beth will take it from there. So for building materials, we expanded. This is a big topic with the Planning Commission and then especially the council. So to make that more flexible, the building material requirements were increased for Class 1 materials to allow more materials. And then prohibited materials were identified. Skipped over bullet point 1. Bullet point 1 is multi-unit residential buildings will have building material requirements applied to them now, which is not true in the current code. So that's an expansion of that standard. And then the last one on the screen is to provide more flexibility for the requirements is to allow averaging of the percentages in the tables in the code across all building facades. So some can be really high around on street frontages, for example, and then they could be lower on the non-street frontages.
So the next development standard to chat about is parking. One of the biggest changes here is that we separated out the requirements so that there is a section that talks about the requirements for single unit and 2-unit dwellings. And then there's another section that talks about the requirements for multi-unit parking, multi-unit residential and non-residential buildings. All of the parking spaces and those requirements of how many spaces per use are all now listed in a table. And with that table, one of the biggest focuses that we're trying to do is look at how we can reduce that parking where appropriate. And if you're looking for the table for the page number, let me see if I can find it quickly for you. Page 113.
Thank you.
Yep. So the biggest focus here is that we were trying to reduce parking requirements and simplify them for how you calculate them. And so we worked on it in a number of different strategies. So for multi-unit residential, we went from a tiered system that was based on the number of bedrooms in a certain unit to just a flat requirement of 1.5 spaces per unit. For commercial, for retail, that requirement was changed. So it used to be 1 per 200 square feet, and now it's 1 parking space per 400 square feet. So that in effect reduces the number of parking stalls required, and the 1 per 400 is fairly industry standard around the region. Industrial, we took a little bit of a different strategy, and we determined that the number of parking spaces is based on the square footage of the floor space, rather than the number of employees on the peak work shift. It's a little bit hard to know what that number is to calculate. So there are opportunities to reduce parking requirements further. You could just apply for a CUP to do that. We also expanded the ability for joint parking to be used within the city. So I believe joint parking today is only allowed with an institutional use. And what that means is one parking area shared between multiple uses. Right now, that, I believe, requires an institutional use to be involved. And we took that institutional use part away, so now it's just any compatible uses could do joint parking. Next up is landscaping. So this is a topic that was scattered kind of throughout the code, at least in 2 separate sections, if not more. And so we brought all those standards together, reviewed them, tried to consolidate them where appropriate, so that everything is now in one section, so you're not going throughout the code to try to find that. Again, we have the single unit and 2-unit dwellings. Those requirements are listed in one section, and then the multi-unit residential and non-residential buildings are listed in another. One of the bigger changes here is for those multi-unit residential and non-residential buildings, the minimum number of trees required was changed. So it used to be 1 tree was required per 800 square feet of landscaped green area. And the proposed new change to that is that it would be 1 tree per 1,000 square feet of the site that's not occupied by buildings, and 1 overstory tree along the boulevard for every 50 linear feet of frontage. The other change here of note is that the minimum size of plants at installation was reduced. We found that the smaller plants tend to survive better, and so that number has been reduced so that it's 1-inch caliper for trees and then 5-gallon containers for shrubs. Next up is tree preservation, and this actually is where we started to kind of mix and match different chapters of the code. So today there's chapter 22, which is trees. It's outside of the zoning code, and we ended up pulling quite a bit of the language from chapter 22 into the zoning code. So chapter 22 is significantly shorter now than it used to be, and then the language about specific tree preservation is living in the zoning code. The biggest changes here we're talking about, there needed to be clarity on what the tree replacement requirement is. And so that's clearly stated now that anytime more than 25% of a site or of the significant trees on a site are removed, that replacement of those trees is required. And then if you remember in chapter 22, there is a really fun table that has options A, B, and C, which is pretty confusing for everyone. And so that's been simplified and the table's been removed to just say that all significant trees are required to be replaced at a ratio of 1/2 caliper inch per 1 caliper inch that's been removed. Yeah.
What is a caliper inch? Is it
Yeah.
different than an inch?
So it's a measure of the diameter at like 4 feet off the ground of the tree.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And the other change here, just to make sure that you are getting a diversity of trees, is that any replacement trees, that grouping needs to be at least 25% hardwood deciduous, and then at least 25% coniferous, so that you're not getting, all oaks, as much as we'd all love that. And then signage. So the big changes here is there's a federal court ruling that says you cannot regulate signs based on their content. And so we went through this section of the code to take out those content-based regulations. So now the regulations are are really focused on, size, height, setbacks, that kind of thing, number of signs, but you really can't regulate the sign and say, if it's a for sale sign, you can do this because you can't regulate based on content. So there's been some language changes with that. We did some minor updates to the billboard requirements, and those updates really just focused on bringing the code into alignment with what the city currently practices today, as well as the legal advice that the city has received, reflecting billboards. There are some changes to temporary signage that relate to making sure that signs do not need a separate permit if they're already associated with a special event permit, and then allowing temporary signs to be displayed for up to 60 calendar days per year. And then we did update a few sign types. So bulletin signs were removed. I'm also not sure what those are. And then blade signs were added. So that's the picture that you see. That's a blade sign. Development procedures, which I believe we're calling administration and procedures in the code. So this is, how does the city go about reviewing applications for land use requests? So all of those procedures, so site plan, variance, conditional use permit, those have all been consolidated into a single article. And at the start of that article, there is a section called Common Procedures. And so that section really covers the things that are applicable to any application. So who can apply? How do you apply? What happens if you want to withdraw an application? Things that apply to all of the different types of applications that are associated with the zoning code. They're all in there so that you don't have to repeat yourself several times. We also clarified how amendments for site plans and planned unit developments are classified. So now it's explicitly stated what a minor amendment is versus a major amendment, so that that's clear because they have different review processes. We also confirmed that any use that's identified in the code as an allowable use is something that could be an interim use if someone applies for one. And then we did remove the application submittal requirements from the code. So right now those submittal requirements are on your online portal as it is, so they don't need to be in two places. The other kind of benefit of that is that as best practices change, as cities no longer need paper copies, for example, you don't have to go through a zoning code amendment to change that. You can just change it as applicable. Then I'll talk a little bit about subdivision here. So that was it for zoning, but we did make a few changes to subdivision as well. Again, we'll start with procedures and enforcement. So there's that common procedures section in the subdivision chapter as well. We did update some of the timeline requirements. So we removed the timelines that are no longer required by state. And then we did update some to make sure that they're in line with state statutes. So just trying to make things a little bit more streamlined there. Again, we took out the application requirements. We clarified the minor subdivision process a little bit more to show that that would be administratively reviewed and that surveys are required as a part of that. And then the last change was that in the code now, it specifically states that the Planning Commission is the body that's responsible for holding public hearings for preliminary plat applications. So design standards for subdivisions, similar to the application requirements, we did remove the engineering design specifications. So a lot of these relate to street standards, so things like street widths, pavement thicknesses, the radius for different turns. All of those have been moved outside of the code. Again, it's a lot easier to update with best practices when those are living outside the code. We did add a few standards for blocks and sidewalk design, clarified with an explicit statement that there are no building permits allowed for outlots, and then specified that water and sewer connections are required for every new buildable lot in the city. A few changes to the improvement section of subdivisions as well. First was that the requirements for financial guarantees, we ended up adjusting that. And the main reason there is that there is language in the zoning code about site plans and financial guarantees, and then there's language in the subdivision chapter about platting and financial guarantees, and we wanted those two to mirror each other. And so we were just trying to make those the same. Yeah.
So what does it mean that the street standards have been moved outside of the code? What does that mean?
Yep. So most cities, and I'll look to Luke and Max to clarify, but most cities have kind of an engineering handbook, and it can be called different things, and that's where those standards typically live rather than in your code itself. So I'm not sure where exactly your standards are.
I can speak to that. Generally, we'll keep the standards, a physical copy at City Hall as well as online or available by email. So that way we can look at it annually as well. And if changes do need to be made, we don't have to go through this process of having a public hearing or in amending the entire ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
And then the last change there was we did update the park dedication language just a little bit to specify when park dedication is required. And then really the main thing was making sure those park dedication regulations are compliant with state statutes, because there's kind of a laundry list of things that need to be in there just based on the statute. Questions on that? Yeah. Pause, and that's kind of the overall summary. We'll go on to next steps after this, but are there any questions, thoughts?
Here's not.
I have questions, but I can hold them too till you're finished.
Oh, okay.
Also, Luke or Max, do you want to talk about the zoning map?
Oh, yeah, that's a good call.
Yes, we do want to take a look at the zoning map as well. If we can get the staff computer up on the screen. So as a part of the zoning code update, in some of the slides earlier, you saw that quite a bit of zoning districts were put together and consolidated. So as a result, we've updated our map to show that. So with this map, we have not individually rezoned any properties. Instead, if we said that a R2 was becoming R3, for example, we've adjusted those existing districts and put it in the map. So we did not go through on a project-specific basis on any parcels. This is available in your packet as well. So it kind of takes those components that are described in the code and applies it on a spatial basis so you can see where it is in the city where these standards apply. We just want to make sure that you see that as well, as it is an important part of the code update, and feel free to ask questions on this.
So with that, we've presented both the code and the map. If there are questions or discussion, that's all we have for tonight, other than next steps.
I have one other question. I don't know if I remember it correctly, but there was the word outlot, right? What does that mean?
So typically an outlot is, it can be a number of different things, but basically it is a parcel of land that it's not buildable for a number of different reasons. So it could be that you have your stormwater on it and there are buildable lots, and then you've got an area where it's stormwater, for example. Outlots also can be if someone is platting a project in phases, and they might plat phase 1 and leave the rest as an outlot so that in the future that would be developed, if that makes sense.
So they would have to come back and plat that outlot before they could do any development on it?
Easier to show with an example, but.
Yeah, you'll also hear it in kind of commercial development. If you think about like Bergen Plaza, so you've got your main, say the, what's the entertainment place? I can't think of it. The Borough. It's the Borough. You've got the main Borough, and then Taco Bell is an outlot of that. So they'll carve off a smaller piece of land. They'll sell it to another business use to come in and develop that. So that's very common in kind of commercial retail development. I got a list of questions for you.
Great.
Subdivision, page 24, cash in lieu. I know that, I think everything I've seen in the past, we typically require cash payments. We haven't accepted kind of park land for park dedication. And it's always been my interpretation of the way the code reads is that we can't, like, it's, the way it reads is, so it's section 2105-204. letter A, the city may choose to accept cash in lieu of land from the applicant for part or all of the required land dedication. So the way I read that is, it's up to the developer to decide, do they want to give land or do they want to give cash? And I think the city in the past has come in and said, no, you just have to give cash. So if that's going to be the case, which I don't have a problem with, I think we just may need to clarify that it's at the city's discretion whether we're accepting land or requiring a cash payment for the park fund or something. As far as the uses go in the kind of the mixed use business uses, I know in a number of cities that I've worked in, I've seen a waterfall. So, you know, B2 district, all the uses in B1 plus these. B3, all the uses in B2 plus these. Have we considered anything like that, or was that discussed at all?
So typically, that is actually something that we try to move away from.
Okay.
Because it tends to make things a little bit more confusing, harder for people as they're using the code. When you go to a specific section and it says everything in the last district, and then you have to flip to that district. And then that district says everything in the district before, and then you're flipping again. And so we're trying with these tables to make it a little bit more clear, just explicitly saying, you know, here's all the districts and here's what's allowed.
And I hear you, and I think you're absolutely right. The table makes it clear from a usability standpoint, but from an implementation standpoint, was there discussion about still applying that waterfall theory? So you could still do it in a table format. It's just, if you allow this use in B2, then you're also going to allow it in B3, B4, et cetera.
Commissioner, I can speak to that a little bit. There is a component to that we considered, particularly with, so our two main commercial districts as the code exists right now are C1 neighborhood commercial and C2 community commercial. When we consolidated those, we went with the uses that were allowed in C2 as they were more encompassing. So with the remaining business districts, so we have the business campus, which is a couple of parcels off of 94 and 694. We feel that that's a generally different use as it's seeking out more of a corporate headquarters or something similar in nature to that. B3 would be light industrial and office, which generally has different uses associated with it, and B4 is more heavy industrial. So we did consolidate the commercial users, and we haven't gotten more restrictive in terms of which uses are allowed with that. Sure. So we've tried to make sure that each district that's now in the new code is different.
Sure, that makes sense. And I think it's, again, it's, if we weren't as built out as we were, we had a lot more opportunity, that it might be a different discussion, but the fact that there's enough or as few parcels as we have that you're able to kind of look at it and really think through it, that's appreciated. Page 123. Landscape and planting guarantees. Again, so in my business locally, I've done work in, I think, 4 cities within the metro, and I think in all of them, we were required to provide a cash landscape escrow that was held for 1 to 2 years to ensure plantings, survived and were maintained and things like that. Did we consider going that route versus, in this case, you've already issued the building permit, you've gone a year, and now you're trying, if the developer doesn't put this planting in, you're trying to chase after them to say, hey, give us some money. In the case in the projects that I've worked on, I had to give that money before I even got my building permit. So the city doesn't have to chase me down again if I don't perform. So I just don't know if that's something we would consider.
Yep, Commissioner, I can speak to that. So that's actually built into the site plan requirements and also the platting requirements. We take as part of the development agreement process with city working with the developer, we take a financial guarantee. It's typically a letter of credit for those site improvements. And then if we're out there, we're making sure that those, the trees are installed correctly and they survive for a certain period of time. Perfect. Yep, so we do collect upfront.
Okay. Thank you. This one is just full disclosure, it's selfish because it's the industry that I work in. It's in the use table for parking, page 114. For car washes, you have a maximum stacking for automatic drive-throughs. I told you it was selfish, it's my industry. I saw that too. You know, we don't put a cap on any other parking use in here, so I'm just curious why we would cap that particular use's stacking requirements.
I'm not remembering offhand if that's a change or not.
Just something to look at. You know, I
yeah.
don't need an answer, just throwing it out there. And then the last thing that I had, and I know that we approved this a while back, so I think it's in a separate section within the code, but anything related to cannabis facilities, because I didn't see it in any uses, I didn't see it in any parking or anything like that.
We can speak to that. The cannabis uses in here are staying the same as they are in the current code, just for the renamed districts. Generally, most of the regulations for cannabis are actually kept in the licensing chapter of the city code, which we're not touching here. And that includes like the setbacks from certain uses and things like that.
Perfect. That was my list of questions. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Any questions for Luke or Max to finalize it? If not, where's the motion? I look for a motion to,
Did you do the public hearing?
oh, no, I did not. Open the public hearing for this matter. Anyone have comment to make on this item? And we do have someone.
This member of the public looks familiar to us.
Susan Willenbring, 2183 Holly Avenue North. Just a quick question. On the zoning, what happens, or is there any instance where you're changing the zoning and, I'm trying to give you an example here. Currently, it's single family, and now it's rezoned to multifamily. I just throwing it out there. What happens to the single family home when they try to sell it? Can another single family home, or will it always stay a single family home and they could sell it, right? Then, go ahead, please go ahead. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
We talked about it a year ago probably, but I don't remember.
Oh, that's totally all right. With this, generally, a lot of the single-family districts actually already allow some sort of multifamily component. Generally, it's listed as a permitted use, so that single-family use will always be allowed, so unless the code changes in some way in the future. And they would always be able to sell it, and it would be a use that we would call conforming. So if they wanted to expand, they could. With the changes to the multifamily district, the high-density one in the code update, we actually made sure that there were no single-family homes left in that district because we did remove it as a permitted use. So we changed those to a medium-density single-family district to ensure that it can remain a use that the homeowner can use in perpetuity and is officially conforming.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? So in the example for the, what was it, the comp plan amendment that we did earlier, so those two single-family homes, if we or someone proactively rezones those to a commercial or a mixed use, then they're legally non-conforming and they can't expand, correct?
From the zoning perspective, that would be correct. From the comp plan amendment, it would not have an impact.
So if you remember, a couple years ago, yeah, we had, that's what that all was, so.
final call. Any questions for anyone? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to recommend approval of ordinance amendments to Chapter 16, Planning and Development, Chapter 21, Subdivisions, Chapter 22, Trees, and Chapter 25, Zoning.
So moved.
Oh,
Mr. Chair.
Close the public forum.
Thank you.
So I look for that same motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Staff liaison update.
Well, thank you, Chair. So the July Planning Commission meeting date will be changed. So it's not going to be July 3rd, right before the holiday. It will be July 10th. And I would expect to have a meeting then. I think we're going to be busy for the next few months, so we'll just plan on the next few months having Planning Commission meetings. I do want to recognize Commissioner Janet Hagan. This is her last meeting. We greatly appreciate your service on the commission. You're going to be missed. I hope it was a good experience, a positive experience. We have commissioner updates, so I'd like to hear your thoughts on your experience in just a moment. And although that is sad news, there is some good news that we have in that there's an interested candidate for the Planning Commission already, and that candidate is being reviewed by and considered by the City Council at this time. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions for the staff, for Luke? Moving on to commissioner update. Any updates from anyone on the commission? And seeing none, we'll move on to council liaison.
So, good evening. As many of you probably already know, I resigned from City Council as of midnight tomorrow night. So, Councilmember Severson has taken my place, and I will let him take it over. It's nice working with all of you.
Thank you for your time, Susan.
We appreciate that you stuck it out for us for one more meeting. You liked us that much that you went tomorrow night.
You stole my, good evening, you stole my first item, but I'll end with my thank yous. But just a couple of things for you this evening. Gary Severson, I'm a newbie on the Oakdale City Council. It's a pleasure to be here. A couple of things citywide, the ACORD award nominations are ongoing right now. Those are available on the website. So if you know a business or a home that's well landscaped and want to nominate those, we'd appreciate that. Oakdale Summerfest, is coming up soon. Again, hopefully you can enjoy that. And I'm sure they would accept volunteers if any of you are interested in doing that. And the last thing I had on citywide is Water Tower 3, which is back here, is undergoing renovation and painting, and not sure how long that'll take, but you'll have a new logo on it, so something to look forward to. On our last council meeting on May 27th, just a couple of things that you folks might be interested in. You probably already know about the Willowbrook 12th edition. We had a public hearing, final plat, and I can't read my own handwriting. Final plat and site plan were approved. And secondly, the Enclave Helmo Station, we approved final plat and authorized development agreement with the developer there. Second to last, well, a couple of things. Congratulations to Chris and Yaya for reappointment to the Planning Commission. And thank you to Commissioner Hagan for your service on the Planning Commission. And lastly, to Susie, we were only colleagues for a short period of time, but I appreciate the patience and your kindness for the newbie on the council and helping me out in listening to dumb questions. So that's all I had. Any questions for me?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And welcome as our liaison.
Thank you.
Seeing as that's the last item on the agenda, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.